Good, everyone. Today I want to talk about something that we all face at some point in life: storms. These storms can come in many forms: the loss of a loved one, financial struggles, personal crises, or even an overwhelming sense of doubt. In the midst of these storms, we often feel as though we are alone, battling through the turbulent winds and heavy rain of our challenges. But today, I want to remind you of a powerful truth. Storms are an undeniable part of life. We all face them. Sometimes they arrive suddenly, and other times they seem to stretch on, testing our strength and our patience. The winds of doubt, the downpour of fear, and the thunder of anxiety can all feel overwhelming. But in the middle of these storms, when everything around us feels chaotic and uncertain, it's easy to forget one important truth: God can handle your storm. You and He. We all feel the dangers of life and the stresses of the world all too often. When you find yourself in the midst of a storm, it often feels as though it's all-consuming. The winds seem relentless, the waves of trouble seem endless, and it's hard to see a way out. But here's the powerful truth to hold on to. The very storm that seems to have power over you is ultimately under God's sovereign control. God is the creator of the wind and the waves. His power is greater than any storm you face. The storms in life may feel strong, but they are no match for the one who holds the universe in his hands. God's power surpasses everything that threatens to overwhelm you. In those moments when you feel isolated, struggling with the weight of your challenges, remember that God is not distant. In fact, He is closer to you than you realize. When we go through storms, we might cry out in desperation, feeling like we are alone in our battles. But God is right there beside you. His presence is not just comforting, it's life-changing. Just as He was with the Israelites in the wilderness and with the disciples on the stormy sea, He is with you in your trial. He's walking beside you even when you feel like you're sinking. You may not always feel Him, but He is there, and He will never leave you. And every moment of every day when your life seems small, storms, though difficult, often serve a greater purpose in our lives. While we may wish we could avoid the pain and difficulty, it is in the storms that we are shaped and refined. Think of the way gold is purified in fire, or how muscles grow stronger under strain. Similarly, God uses the trials we face to mold us into the people He wants us to become. The storm isn't a sign that God has abandoned you. It's part of His plan to build your character, strengthen your faith, and prepare you for what is yet to come. In the pressure, we grow deeper and more resilient. But perhaps the most comforting truth of all is that God promises to bring you through every storm. He is faithful, and He does not leave us in our suffering. Even when we can't see a way out, we can trust that God will make a way. Just as He parted the Red Sea for the Israelites, He will part the waters for you. His deliverance may not always look the way we expect, and it may not come when we want it, but it will come. God is with you in the storm, and He will lead you safely through. So when you're in the middle of your own storm, remember these truths. God is bigger than your storm. He is present with you in the storm. He is using the storm to shape you, and He promises to bring you through it. No matter how fierce the winds blow, how heavy the rain falls, know this: God can handle your storm. Life brings storms, sometimes subtle and sometimes fierce. They come in many shapes and forms: personal trials, losses, struggles, or even the weight of unanswered questions. When we find ourselves in the middle of one, the turmoil can be overwhelming. In these moments, it's easy to feel helpless, as if we're being crushed by the circumstances around us. But one truth remains firm: regardless of the severity of the storm, God can handle your storm. I want to take a deeper look at two key truths that can help us navigate the storms of life. When we face storms, it's easy to think that God is distant, perhaps too far removed to notice our pain or to care for our struggles. But this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, God's presence is one of the most powerful comforts we can have when facing life's storms. His nearness is not conditional on our circumstances. He is with us in every high and every low, in every wave that crashes, and every gust of wind that threatens to knock us down. Think about the story of the disciples caught in a violent storm on the Sea of Galilee. As the winds howled and the waves threatened to capsize their boat, they panicked, waking Jesus, who was asleep. In their fear, they questioned his care. "Lord, don't you care if we drowned?" Jesus then stood up, rebuked the storm, and the wind immediately died down. But more importantly, before he calmed the storm, he had already been with them. He was with them in the boat, even as the storm raged. God's presence doesn't disappear when the storm hits. In fact, sometimes it is in the storm that we experience God's presence most deeply. When we feel like we are at our weakest, his strength becomes more apparent. When we feel overwhelmed, his peace surpasses all understanding. God isn't absent during your storm. He is right there, walking alongside you, guiding you, and holding you close. Even when you don't feel it, he is present, and his presence is enough to give you the courage and strength to endure. God doesn't promise a life without storms, but he promises that no matter what, he will never leave us. He is with you in every moment, offering his unwavering presence as a source of refuge and strength. There is no storm in life that is greater than God's power. It's easy to get consumed by the intensity of a trial, to let it dictate our thoughts, emotions, and even our actions. When storms come, they can feel like they are the defining force of our lives. But we must remember that God's power is infinite, unshakable, and far greater than anything the world can throw at us. Think of the story in the Bible where Jesus calms the storm. The disciples were terrified, watching as the storm grew more violent, but Jesus, with a simple command, rebuked the wind and the waves. "Quiet, be still," he said, and immediately the storm ceased. What's powerful about this story is not just that Jesus calmed the storm, but that he demonstrated that his authority over creation is absolute. Nothing, no storm, no chaos, no enemy is beyond his control. When we face our own storms, we often feel as if they are insurmountable. The noise of life's troubles can drown out everything else. But even in these moments, we must remind ourselves that God's power is not only sufficient, but also supreme. The storms that rage around us are temporary, but God's power is eternal. The moment the storm feels unbearable, we can call on the name of Jesus, and we are reminded that he is bigger than our fears, bigger than our circumstances, and bigger than our pain. It is easy to focus on the storm itself, the violence, the disruption, the fear it causes. But in those moments, we need to shift our perspective. Instead of focusing on how big the storm is, let's focus on how big God is. We are not powerless in the face of storms because we serve a God who has power over them. Our storms may test us, but they will never overpower God. God doesn't promise us a life free of storms, but he does promise to be the one who holds all power in his hands. When the winds of doubt howl and the rain of hardship falls, we are not facing them alone. We are not facing them in our own strength, but with the power of God on our side. His power can handle any storm, no matter how fierce, and he will bring us through it. So today, remember these truths. God's presence is with you in every moment of your storm, and God's power is greater than any storm you face. You are never alone, and no storm can ever overwhelm you, because the one who holds the universe is holding you. Life inevitably brings storms, some small and manageable, others vast and overwhelming. Whether they come as sudden crises, long periods of struggle, or intense personal pain, storms can easily overwhelm us. It's easy to feel as though the storm will drown us, taking our hope, our peace, and even our strength. But today I want to remind you of something profound. God can handle your storm. When we are in the middle of a storm, we often feel as though we are lost, tossed by the waves of uncertainty, pain, or fear. It can seem as though the storm has a life of its own, with no escape in sight. But there is a deeper truth that we must cling to, especially in the hardest moments. God uses storms to shape us. When we think about storms, we often focus on how damaging they can be. But have you ever considered how God might be using the storm for something greater? God doesn't waste our pain or our struggles. While the storm may seem destructive in the moment, it is often the very thing that refines us. Think of how a diamond is formed under intense pressure. The pressure we experience in life's storms has the potential to refine our character, strengthen our faith, and deepen our trust in God. In the book of James, it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." In that verse, James is reminding us that through the trials, God is at work, teaching us perseverance, building endurance, and preparing us for something greater. The storm is not sent to destroy us, but to mold us into something stronger. Just as the Israelites wandered through the wilderness and faced numerous trials, God didn't abandon them. He used those difficult times to teach them trust, to shape their identity as His people, and to refine their hearts. God works the same way in our lives. Even though the storm is uncomfortable, we can trust that God is using it for our good, teaching us lessons that we might not learn in the calm. This is not to say that God causes every storm or that every trial we face is easy or without pain. But we can take comfort in the fact that God is always present and is always working through the storm to shape us. If we have a right relationship with God and shape our minds onto Him, He will shape our fate. The third truth I want to emphasize is that God's promise is to bring us through the storm. Sometimes, when we are in the midst of hardship, it feels as though the storm will never end. The waves keep crashing, the winds keep howling, and it seems like we are sinking deeper with no way out. But God's word assures us that He is faithful, and He will bring us through. The storm may not always pass in our time or in the way we expect, but God's deliverance is sure. If you look at the stories of those who experienced hardship in the Bible, you see that God never left them stranded. He always made a way. The Israelites were delivered from Egypt. Joseph was brought out of prison. And Jesus calmed the storm for His disciples. Just as He was faithful to them, He will be faithful to you. The storms you face might feel relentless, but they are temporary. God promises that He will not leave us in the storm forever. He will walk with us through it, and He will lead us to the other side. We must remember that God is not only with us in the storm, but also has a plan for our lives that goes beyond the storm. The storm is not the end of our story, it is just a part of the journey. And though the storm might shape us, it does not define us. God has the final word, and He will lead us to safety, to peace, and to restoration. We all face storms in life, some seemingly small and others so overwhelming that they threaten to consume us. In these moments, it can feel as though there is no way out, no solution, no hope for peace. But I want to remind you today of a profound truth. God can handle your storm. When we think about storms, we often focus on how difficult they are, on how relentless the winds of fear and doubt can feel. Yet, even in the most overwhelming trials, God's power, His presence, His purpose, and His promise work together to help us navigate the storm. First, God's power surpasses the storm's fury. It's easy when we are in the thick of the storm to become consumed by it. The noise of our struggles, the weight of our fears, the intensity of our pain can seem like the defining force in our lives. We can feel helpless, as if we are being tossed about with no way to gain control. But what we often forget in these moments is that the power of God is greater than any storm. The wind, the waves, the chaos, these things may appear powerful, but they are nothing compared to the one who commands the heavens and the earth, and therefore demands of us the respect and honor of this incredibly powerful being. Think about the story of Jesus calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee. His disciples were terrified, and they cried out to Him, asking if He cared that they were perishing. Jesus, with a simple command, rebuked the wind and the waves, and immediately there was a great calm. What's powerful about this moment is that it shows the authority of God over all creation. There is no storm that can stand against his power. No matter how fierce the winds of life may blow, no matter how dark the clouds may appear, God's power can bring peace and order in an instant. When we face trials, it is crucial to remember that God's power is greater than any storm, and no storm can overcome his sovereignty. Second, God's presence is with us in every moment of the storm. When we face challenges, we often feel isolated, as if we are alone in our pain. It's easy to believe that God is distant, especially when we are going through something difficult. But in truth, God is always with us. In fact, he promises never to leave us or forsake us. Even when we can't feel him or see him working, his presence is with us. Think about the times in your life when you felt most lost or overwhelmed. It may have seemed like there was no way through, or that you were standing alone in the darkness. Yet when you reflect back on those moments, you might realize that you were never truly alone. God was walking with you, even when you couldn't see him. He was there in your quiet moments of prayer, in your heart when you felt at your lowest, and in the strength that he gave you to keep going. God's presence in the storm doesn't always remove the storm itself, but it does give us the strength to face it. Just as God was with the Israelites in the wilderness, as he walked with Daniel in the lion's den, and as he was with Paul through his many trials, God is with you in your storm, ready to strengthen, comfort, and guide you through it. Third, God uses storms to refine us and grow our faith. It's easy to believe that storms exist to punish us or to hold us back. However, God uses challenges and adversity as opportunities for growth. Just as a tree grows stronger with the wind, our faith grows stronger through the storms of life. It is through these trials that we learn perseverance, patience, and trust. In the book of James, we are reminded that we should consider it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds, because the testing of our faith produces perseverance. The storm might not be something we would choose, but it is often in the storms of life that we experience our greatest growth. When everything is calm, we tend to rely on our own strength and understanding, but when the storm hits, we are forced to rely on God. And it is in those moments that our faith is refined. Lastly, the storm may shape us, but it will not break us, because God uses it for our good and his glory. Finally, God's promises to bring us through the storm. Sometimes in the midst of hardship, it can feel like the storm will never end. It seems endless, relentless, and it can feel as though we will never make it through. But God's word assures us that he will never leave us in the storm forever. He promises to bring us through. The storm may not end as quickly as we want it to or in the way we expect, but God is faithful to his promises. Just as he led the Israelites through the Red Sea, just as he delivered Daniel from the lion's den, just as he calmed the storm for his disciples, God will bring us through. His timing is perfect, and his deliverance is certain. In the end, the storm may have a purpose that we do not yet fully understand, but God is with us in it, using it, and leading us through it. So when you face your own storm, remember that God's power is greater than anything you face, that his presence is with you in every moment, that he is refining you through it, and that he promises to bring you through. You are not alone, and no storm is beyond his control. Thank you.